when you're at the actual South Pole facility, you experience over the course of a year one celestial day. At the South Pole, it takes 365 days for the sun to have one cycle. It goes up and down once. Now, perspective while you're at the South Pole is that you now just see in the summertime is the sun is just going around you at the horizon. And then over the course of the fall, the solstices are different. So December 21st is the summer solstice. So when I arrived in November, I was privy to the sun working its way around the horizon, but getting higher and higher every day until the circle was tight and now it's above you. And then I get to see it go back down again, and then it eventually drops below the horizon line, and then it's just gone until the next year. It's gone. It's pitch black. And the coolest thing that you could ever see in your life, technically on this planet, as far as I'm concerned, is the South Pole Station in the winter time on a crisp day because of the 9,300 feet of elevation, right? So imagine this. You turn your back so that there's no facilities anywhere. It's just the horizon and space above it and you. You simply take your head and you lift it up a couple of degrees. The Earth now drops out of your field of view because it was just simply the flat horizon, and you're now in space technically because you don't see anything else. There's nothing else in your field of view. Tilt your head up, you can turn 360 degrees now, and you are in space. The most beautiful clusters, the density of stars. You can watch the Iridium satellites go by with clarity. You can see everything. It was so gorgeous. Auroras, when auroras would fire up. Again, this is why I said I like having this light because it, prospectively reminds me of the Aurora Australis, because you can't get it if you're not there, so to say. Pictures, video of an aurora do zero justice to witnessing one in real life. And I can only assume, especially at the South Pole Station, because it's so dark. I mean, I know the crews that work there and the tricks that they would have to do to the camera to get it to just to function, to have enough light in that environment to get exposure of the aurora would wash it out so much that it's none of the detail is in it anymore, that what you get to witness in real life. And it looked way more to me like flames, like rolling flame tips and things like that, instead of like in the movies where it looks almost like just like wavy stuff. Like they make it just look like blotches of green and blue swimming around, like swirling in an ocean, like more like what this looks like up on my ceiling. It looks more like that when you see it in videos and things. But in real life, there's more precision to the edges on the stuff. And it looks more like fire to me. It looked way more like fire.
What is the explanation of the lights?
The auroras, it's the interactions with the sun discharge and the magnetosphere, the angle of the planet, and that's why it's most visible by the poles and in darkness. So because I happen to be literally at the pole and in pure darkness, I got to see auroras that are like beyond description, freakishly gorgeous. We were in the middle of an event one day. We had the tunnel system. We have maintained ends that protrude out of the ice that we can bring gear in and out of, and they have snow accreting over the course of the winter up at the top. We call it a snow cornice, and we would have to cut those off the roof line with a big rope and a team to, it's a substantial amount of weight that if it fell on someone, it would hurt them. So for safety's sake, we were cutting these cornices off. We're outside, wintertime, South Pole, and all of a sudden, in the middle of us working, like this glow comes down on us. And like, it's pretty dark out that day, but like the color changed. And we looked up, and there was this complete ring of green aurora above us in total motion. It was in a fury of it was like a tube almost, like it was shooting and spinning through this ring. And we were like, wow, look at that. And it looked like it was coming in from one side, like as if there was something inserting more energy into it. And it was like loading up, loading up, loading up, and the ring would get like bigger and faster and more crazy. And it would do that for a little bit. And then all of a sudden, it was like from the side where the energy was coming in 180 degrees across from the circle, the opposite side. After it went wild for a bit, it was like it would blow out the other side. And it was, we were just sitting there watching, and we all stopped working. We were all laying on our backs, just looking up at this. And it was really cool. And we called it, we'd say, look, it's charging up again. And that would be like when it would start reinserting from the filling side. And then it would go all crazy, crazy, crazy again and blow out the other side. And it was just like, I don't know what the heck we were looking at technically, but it was just insanely awesome. We're watching the energies of the galaxy blending with our planet, like right before our eyes is what was going on. And it was really cool. This is my speculation, okay? I'm speculating that there's so many programs out there that have done so many things before under the table, right? That it leads me to believe, why would this circumstance be any different? And if you pay attention to the history of Antarctica from every country's perspective, and the treaties that were signed and things like that, and the tactics of lawyers, okay? Just because they said you can't bring in like the treaty technically said from the signing of the treaty on, you can't do these things. It never said that you have to stop doing them if you're already doing them, in a way, or that you would have to fess to them either. So, I mean, it just leads me to believe there's a lot of room for people to interpret things differently. And then if one person's interpretation was it's fine, well, then it's just fine, because there's technically the Antarctic Treaty is basically it's a hands-off gentleman's agreement. Basically, it really just means you do what you do, we'll do what we do, and we'll all just admit that we're just going to do the things we said we were going to do. Sound cool? Cool. That's the Antarctic Treaty. Everybody reserves the right to go check on each other's stuff, yet no one ever does it. So what's going on at everybody's facility? Whatever they say. So I mean, and what has history shown us in these circumstances where we just let the powers that be the powers that they are?
Why was that location you were at so important? Because of the geographical location?
I think initially it was a power play, that when they initially were wintering in 1957, don't forget, they sent the military there. It wasn't a research crew. This was, I think, a time where prior to the treaty, Antarctica was a free-for-all. And this is how every nation showed their presence in the world, or their intentions, by moving militaries in. And that's what was going on in Antarctica at the time. And the treaty wasn't signed, and it was a land of resource, and people were trying to figure out what to do with that resource. And then lo and behold, it became a protected thing. So things changed, the contract got signed, and now all of a sudden it wasn't about resources, it was about protection and science. So we're told by all the higher ups of every single nation that gets to just sign a treaty to show up and then be part of the team that gets to say, we're just doing what we said we're doing. Now, I'll tell you this. I have worked up in the northern parts of Alaska as well. And I've met other people who have confided in me, and they said that they were working for companies that I'm familiar with their names on what we call it a cat train, when you have tracked vehicles going out with birthing units, and they go out into the middle of nowhere to do stuff on a cat train. So this dude was working on the cooking staff of a cat train, and he confessed to me that, he was listening to my stories about Antarctica, and he was like, oh, I've been to Antarctica too. I said, oh, what did you do there? Oh, I was a cook on a cat train. Oh, what were you doing on the cat train? Traversing the pole? He says, no, we were looking on places to build missile silos. I went, excuse me? And he goes, yeah, we were looking for places to build missile silos. I go, you're not supposed to tell people that. He goes, I don't care. And I said, okay. He goes, what are they going to do to me? I said, okay. it's extremely interesting how many people came and go. You wouldn't know who they are. It could totally fit that way. I mean, you literally, there are times there's people coming and going. You never see 1 inch of their skin. They're just completely covered head to toe. I don't know. It was a person in there. I don't know. I have no idea. Technically, it was someone walking by me covered completely, and that happened all the time. Most people, you didn't actually see them. And then there was also people that were completely unaffiliated with us at all. So we are at the South Pole, okay? We happen to be the facility. Well, the whole entire planet, there's people all over the planet that want to go to the South Pole. There's nothing technically stopping them if you have the budget. So we would also have all kinds of folks showing up by whatever means they decided to get there. Different vehicles, people would manufacture peculiar vehicles and things like that because someone invested in this thing to get to the South Pole. I mean, we're not the only country in the world, and there's other people and other folks have ideas. I've seen a lot of wacky things show up at the South Pole. There was one thing, there's called the Moon Regan expedition, I think it was, and it was like they took the cockpit of a plane basically and stuck it on like 3 skis. There was like 1 ski in the front and like 2 skis in the back, but then behind the cockpit it was like the propeller for a like an airboat. So it was like they were airboating across the surface of Antarctica to get to the South Pole. So like stuff like that, like all of a sudden, like you're out working and all of a sudden you just see this thing coming across the ice and you're like, what is going on? Like, what is wrong with these people that are like risking their lives to get here? I saw an event one day that I have, my channel, Deciphering My Experience. I'm trying to figure things out, right? So I don't have all of the answers. I just have my experiences and I'm trying to interpret them. One of those things happened at South Pole. When I first started discussing things about South Pole, a lady had inquired, and at the time I was describing it like it was an asteroid or something like that. But in hindsight, I really am reframing this memory to the point I think I might have seen a UFO at the South Pole. And the reason being is it never went down. Okay. I watched this thing. Same return trip that I was talking about before when I was coming back from the telescope and I had burned my cheek. Same exact path. So I was walking back to the elevated station on another day, and it wasn't stormy. It was rather clear out. And for whatever reason, I decided to look upward into the sky. And in the distance in front of me is the elevated station proper, but now over it, coming from my left, which would have been grid north at that location, in the sky was the biggest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like a huge, giant, round, and I mean round like a globe, what looked like this giant burning ball that was tearing across the sky so fast. And it was like, so there was the burning ball in the front, and then there was like a trail of flames behind it that was substantial. And then behind the section of trailing flames was a large section of what would be trailing smoke. Like after all of the combustion was, there's the fire and then the trail of smoke. And then this whole entire thing, the big flaming ball, the flaming trail, and the smoke trail was taking up so much of the sky. And now consider that we're at 9,300 feet of elevation. There's no mountains, there's nothing. So everything else technically drops down. So from our perspective, I can't even begin to calculate how much like miles this thing is covering in my field of view, so to say, to go all the way from the horizon line to the left, to then pass over our facility straight as an arrow, to then continue all the way out through to the other horizon as well. To me, now in hindsight, seems that that was a determined path. It was linear and with motion, and it never went down. It's not like it came from up high and I saw this thing come down and go down into the ice somewhere in the distance. I watched it go all the way from the horizon on the left, across my entire field of view, and then all the way out to the horizon, like a damn plane, technically. So that to me was some sort of controlled flight. I don't know. It never dropped. It could have been anything, but for me, the fact that now I can't get rid of the idea that I know that it never dropped. And it was when I was conversing with her at the time, because she was asking me about UFOs, and I was like, nah, I never saw UFOs. And I was describing this to her at the time, but now ever since I described it, I'm like, man, it never dropped though. So it's like, I don't know. I think I saw something. The South Pole Telescope proper is basically looking out for other star systems and clusters and planets and things like that. And I find in tons of them, tons and tons and tons, all over the place. And then you also have they have MAPO, which is another telescope out in the dark sector. Also, again, cosmological stuff. That's the vast majority of what they're doing at the South Pole, is looking off of the planet for signs of life and things like that that are important. Also in the dark sector, they have the ice cube neutrino detector, which is a fantastic machine. You know, again, you wonder what these things do. I always feel like there's primary, secondary, tertiary agendas and things like that. But they present it as you know, it's looking for neutrinos, and it does do that. It looks for neutrinos and it finds neutrinos. But boy, that's a big device, and they put a lot of money in that thing. That covers miles. That thing. It's an array in the ice. Miles and miles and miles of wire in that thing. But for all practical purposes, when you go there, it's all down in the ice. It's buried. There's a blue building on top with some silver towers that have the cabling going down, and they have all like the computer servers and stuff in there that run the array. But the array is embedded in the ice. It's a massive thing. They have what they call DOMs, digital optical monitors, and they're like these plexiglass balls that are like the size of a basketball, and that's what they're using to detect the neutrinos. So they take they call it a string of DOMs, and it's 2 miles long. So basically, they go from the top of the ice, and they use water to drill down and make a hole. Excuse me. I think it was like 32 or 34 inches in diameter, this hole, right? That goes down for 2 miles. If you're brave, you jump over one. you just step right over it. It's very emboldening to be like, wow, if I mess this up, I'm going to drop down the 2 mile ice hole. They've pulled out like palm tree pieces and yeah, they've pulled up garbage from other camps and things like that. That's correct. I forgot about that. Yes, the ice cube drillers would find weird stuff, rocks and things. Yeah, because they would go down. They would go down to the surface, and it's not that hard. So that's another thing that I do find funny, actually, in the science world. You know, they talk about, oh, and you know, the Russians spent all these years drilling down to get to such and such. You know how fast it is to get down through the ice? It's such a joke. They make it out like it's hard. It's really easy. Yep, it's easy to get rid of the ice. So I think it's funny when scientists around the world, for some reason, present it like it takes so long. And I guess it's just so they can get extended funding. I don't know. Anyone can go to the South Pole if you have the money. Straight up. Antarctica is just the continent for the wealthy or governments. It's hands off for poor people. Let's just put it this way. There's an old saying about Antarctica. And they say that once you pass 60 degrees south, there's no law. Once you pass 70 degrees south, there's no hope. And once you pass 80 degrees south, there's no God. So the further you want to go south, it just becomes exponentially more problematic. And the coastline is one thing, but now if you want to move further inland, logistics and support, I mean, this is where the cost comes in, because again, no one's stopping you from going there, but to understand what you're really trying to do and you're really trying to be prepared for, the expense of dealing with that is overcoming the obstacle of making sure that you're keeping people safe and alive, because there are no resources. You are your rescue plan as well. So whatever you're planning on doing, has to work. And if it doesn't, you now have to figure it out with the resources that you brought, because no one's coming to help you there. So many different topics I do believe are interconnected, and we have a lot of specialists in many fields that I think we just need to get in the room together and intercommunicate a bit and be like, you know, what you're saying is true and what you're saying is true, but did you guys ever think of talking to each other and figuring out that now what this guy is saying is true also? But from what I've seen historically about the topics and the people and the activities in Antarctica, I am a firm believer that there's other things going on. And that's part of what I'm trying to do is bring to light that it is different and not as presented. But I have to be very careful in how I present that because, like I stated earlier, my crew only had 49 people on it. So certain info streams in my life, so like South Pole or even other directions, certain things that come out of my mouth, other parties are going to know that I only know it because of a particular person. So I guess, like being a reporter, I guess I have to protect where I get information from. So the South Pole stuff I do enjoy talking about, but I have to be guarded on how I present certain information because I can't get other people in trouble. So I'm walking a fine line right now. I am told that we were very close to the spot that Bird was referring to as the oases. Okay, I'm told that. I've never been to the oases. It is my understanding that it is in the no-fly zone, that is in proximity to the South Pole. I do know that that stuff exists, but I haven't myself flown over there, you know? So it's, you know, there's a lot of people that say that the South Pole itself is a no-fly zone, which isn't true because planes come in and out. And Antarctica, for all practical purposes, in reality, just because of logistics, it's inherently a no-fly zone. People aren't going to go in that direction because there's no point in it and there's no support. A lot of our flight lines and shipping lanes in the entire planet have been determined for thousands of years. Our shipping lanes have been like that for there's so many parts of this planet we've never gone to yet because we're scared to because it's theoretically unsafe and not proven. So planes don't fly over Antarctica because what happens if it goes down? Nothing. You just die. No one can come help you at all. No one can even investigate it. So it's off limits, mostly just because there's no support staff for anything going wrong. It doesn't exist there. Not far from South Pole, as far as planes fly, there is a known, I've seen it on the maps, there is a no-fly zone. Relative to our facility, it was huge. I'm picturing the map that I was looking at, the blueprint, and the facility was indicated as very small. And I would have to say that it was maybe it would have been like 40 miles from us. And then with that being said, I'm trying to guess on acreage wise of something like that. It probably, it's huge. Maybe 30 by 40 miles or something like that. You know, it wasn't communicated to me. As far as flight lines go and why planes are told not to fly places, presuming that there's nothing there, there should only be ice, right? So if there's no facilities there and it's only ice, then there's nothing to see and they should let planes fly over, is the way that I look at it. The only thing that I could think of that would justify it would be if there's maybe some sort of magnetic anomaly that might be problematic, because again, there's always challenges when you're discussing Antarctica and the South Pole. So for every trade. So I would imagine that for pilots, it's actually challenging to navigate to the South Pole with whatever equipment they normally would use, because it's not going to, like, all their magnetic stuff is dysfunctional there. So it could be that it's a no-fly zone for some reason of flight paths and function. I'm not sure.
There's an Anunnaki base there, folks.
Yeah, I mean, I that's actually where my brain wants to go, because I don't see a justification for locking up areas in Antarctica, to be honest. Like, from what I experienced, there's so few and far between people there that, like, to even make a point of saying, like, don't go there. It's like, well, who are you telling this to? There's no one here to tell it to. Like, who's going to be flying over there that you need to tell this to? You know, like, why are all these doors locked? Like, who's going to break into anything here? Like, there's not some dude driving down the street like, I'm going to go walk into this building. You know, so stuff like that I found hilarious. We can all learn that we've been a bit bamboozled. I mean, that's the direction I'm coming from, is that we're all human beings and we're all in this together. And I often say that 80% of our lives match and 20% of our lives are different from everybody else's. And I'm just trying to get everybody to share their 20% and not be ashamed of it. We've all got weird stories in us.